Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I want to talk about a type of intelligence that is a little more uncommon. It happens when people have been abused or traumatized, and this video is for intellectual purposes. So there's a term that some people use, but it's not a clinical term, traumatic intelligence, where unfortunately these patterns are developed after chronic stress and trauma. It's not a diagnostic impression. Again, it's not even a clinical term, but it's something that can help you at least distinguish where this is coming from and help you to understand that you're not alone and unfortunately where it comes from. I've made videos about trauma, but I haven't made a video regarding the intelligence that you end up developing due to these very extreme circumstances. And the first one is the one that I notice almost immediately with any of the sessions that I've had with you guys, and I tell you about it if it's something that is prominent enough. High adaptability, quickly adjusting to changing situations, sometimes and almost often at the expense of your own self or preferences. And so example would be, let's say you're in a relationship and this woman, maybe she is not healthy for you, she might be abusive. Instead of setting the boundary, you are so afraid subconsciously of what this may end up as that you might be afraid of being reprimanded, manipulated further, etc. And so what you actually do is you quickly change yourself so that you can almost de-escalate the situation instead of standing up for yourself because you're so afraid of what can happen. Or sometimes it's not even about de-escalation. You just continuously bend your boundaries because that's what you did growing up. And why this is intelligence is because your brain is very quick to adapting. There's no resistance, and you can quickly scan for what needs to be adapted to resolve the situation. So it is an intelligent characteristic, but it's unfortunate because it comes from trauma. But your brain is very quick. Very quick. People who don't have trauma, they cannot do this nearly as quickly. I mean, I see it firsthand when I'm practicing, how quick some of these people can do it, even like marriage therapy, where you see maybe both of them are not healthy for each other and they're trying to make it work. They have a lot of trauma and they continuously do this off one another, even if sometimes the situation could very well be resolved another way, but they've been traumatized. If you're interested in more exclusive content from me, I post 5 minimum exclusive videos a month in our group, and we do other things as well. So if you are interested in joining, that is pinned in the comments. The next one is actually reading subtle social cues. So you're very attuned to facial expressions, body language, and shift of emotions, actually. You're very aware of another person's emotions. And what actually happens, which is very interesting, is you're also able to separate from where some of these things are coming from more than the other person. So let's say, for example, a person that you're in a relationship with, they've been very detached and it's because of work stress, but they don't realize they're stressed out, but you can tell that it's work stress. You're able to tell all of these different variables because unfortunately, when you were younger, you had to be very attuned because sometimes it meant your survival means. The next one is difficulty relaxing, and the reason why people might perceive this as intelligent is you might be very productive. And sometimes you might have a very strong output. So you might be working almost continuously. You might be working on multiple projects at once. And so people perceive this as, okay, this person is really intelligent. They know a lot. And you do. But part of it is because inwardly, you actually feel guilty resting, or you might always expect something to go wrong. So you're almost preparing for that. A lot of times I have some of you guys that I've been seeing weekly where often a lot of you guys are financially very successful, but sometimes it's because, which I understand and I appreciate everything, we work slowly and I want to meet you where you're at. But sometimes what happens is it's because you have financial trauma. Maybe you came from poverty. And so there's a part of you that's afraid to ever experience that again. So you continuously have multiple streams of income. The next one is perfectionism. And a lot of people perceive this as intelligent because you know a lot, because sometimes you're afraid of making mistakes. You might feel like mistakes are unacceptable, so you hold yourself to a very high standard. And so people do perceive that you have a lot of knowledge because you do, but they're not seeing why. You feel like making mistakes are unsafe. And you were probably reprimanded severely by just being yourself. And so there's a part of you that believes that you're never enough. And that's the depth of the perfectionism. The next one is actually, I'm trying to explain it. I don't have the term quite yet because I'm not fully sure how I would word it, but I see it with a lot of you guys in, weekly sessions and I've shared it with you. I'm not sharing anyone's information. Like, I'm just sharing patterns. I'm not talking about anyone specific. When there's a crisis or when there's something, I guess, troublesome going on, you're able to allocate everybody's tasks very well, and you're able to shut off your emotions very quickly. A lot of times what happens is when you were younger, there was something that happened that was a life or death situation, and you had no choice but to do whatever you can. So actually what's happening is like survival instincts, I guess we can say. Like, survival instincts kicks in during any sort of emergency, but also when life is unsettled instead of peaceful. So even if there's something very small, maybe your tire blew, I don't know, or maybe you have a bubble on your tire, bumped a curb, and now you got like the bubble, okay? And yeah, of course, you want to change that tire right away, but you're very effective. You're able to quickly, maybe you have to go to work, you're able to quickly manage things, call out, communicate in the way where you need to fix that emergency right away. You've tunnel visioned on it. Whereas perhaps maybe there's another option and you don't need to necessarily be that specific about it, but you are able to very quickly effective, efficient, and you're able to stay calm. But it's because you had no choice when you were younger. And so you pick the skill up. And now almost every event, you almost perceive it as potentially life-threatening, which is why you behave this way subconsciously. The next one is that you plan ahead. I want to say constantly, but I don't, that's more of an exaggeration because I don't know if that's necessarily possible, but your brain might be doing so. It might be where you always have some form of a backup plan and you're mentally preparing for every outcome. So I had mentioned some, cases that I have where this person, a lot of them, so I'm not talking about anyone specific, they will have multiple streams of income simply because they are afraid to ever face poverty again. But a lot of it is because they plan subconsciously that they believe that poverty will occur again without the trauma of them. Well, I wouldn't say without the trauma, but without them facing the reality that possibly they were in that situation because of another reason. And I'm going to give an example. This is not this is an example. It's not a case that I have, but let's say, for example, this child, he grew up in a family where they were in poverty. He perceived it that way, and perhaps that's really what it was. Maybe his parents had a use issue. It's hard for him to accept that part of the reason they didn't have money. I'm not saying this is always the case, though. There's definitely other reasons. So please don't think I'm saying every person, it's their fault or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But let's say for this example, his parents didn't have money, not because they didn't, it's because they spent it on other things. And instead, they would rather sacrifice their children's clothes, food, hygiene, housing, so that they can, they're troubled in their own way. They're feeding their addiction. But in order for this person, let's say, for example, this case study, let's say his name is John, in order for John to accept that maybe he won't get into poverty the same way he was because he's not struggling with a use issue and he would never do that to a child or anybody, he would have to face the fact that a part of it that he experienced was simply because of his parents' negligence and choice. Well, of course, they were dealing with an active addiction, but it's still a parent's responsibility. And this is neglect and abuse, depending on what was happening. And in order for John to accept that, he has to put blame outside of himself. And sometimes people are traumatized. That's very hard. So rather he blame himself and almost think, if I don't plan ahead, I will end up in that situation again. That's why he does that. And the last one is overdeveloped intuition. This one is absolutely amazing, even though it's very sad that it happens. People who are traumatized sometimes they have an intuition that is spot on. Sometimes it's anxiety, but sometimes what we're seeing is eventually they can distinguish the difference, and they almost can tell when somebody is not good right away. When actuality, There's that subconscious signs that people are not healthy or beneficial, etc. But sometimes they can tell. For example, a coworker is maybe not a good guy, maybe he's manipulative, and everybody falls for his charm. But you, let's say, for example, you have this intuition that maybe he's actually not doing any work and he's just manipulating people. You can tell because, sadly, you've kind of experienced manipulative people your whole life. And so your intuition is very sharp, sharper than a lot of people. Again, this is dependent because there are some people who are so traumatized their intuition is actually the other way, where they actually believe everybody is dangerous. But there are some people, especially when you can fine tune it and kind of start understanding what happened, your intuition is very powerful. And so I hope this video is helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.